Welcome to Creepy Vibes. For months now, my friend, I've been sharing these horror stories with you, but not once have you said, we'd love to see more stories like this in the comments. Kia dare Najira hi, ya typing main fakin? And still, for months, I've been bringing you tales from the edge of sanity. Stories soaked in shadow, screams, and the kind of silence that follows you home. But most of you just watch, then vanish. Today, we're diving into 20 scary true Texas road trip horror stories. Each one darker than the last, and if you think these roads are empty, think again. Subscribe now before the next knock comes from inside. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments if you're not too scared to speak. Let's begin. It starts with a long stretch of asphalt that most maps don't even bother to name. FM 666. Some call it Farm to Market Road 666. Others just call it that damned highway. It cuts a crooked line through the scrublands near Mathis. A place where the wind never really stops, just changes direction. There's a mile-long section between two rusted cattle gates, no homes, no barns, not even buzzards overhead. Just sun-bleached grass and weathered mesquites, bowing in a breeze that seems to whisper instead of howl. Locals say don't drive that mile after sundown. They'll tell you it's just bad luck, that engines die on that stretch and you might get stranded, but they leave something out. They don't talk about the scream. Cody Marlin was a mechanic in Corpus. Good with engines, great with transmissions, and bad with people. Divorced twice before 30, childless, and prone to whiskey when he wasn't under a hood. He was the kind of guy who'd argue with a vending machine and lose. On a muggy Thursday in July, he got a call from his cousin Ronnie up in Alice. Transmission trouble. Cody threw a socket set in the bed of his truck, gulped black coffee that tasted like old pennies, and headed north. He didn't even remember taking the turn onto FM 666. Just glanced down at the radio, fiddled with the dial, and when he looked back up, there it was. A crooked wooden sign half rotted into the ditch. FM 666. Use at own risk painted in flaking red brushstrokes. No county seal. No mile marker, nothing official. He laughed and muttered something about rednecks with too much time, then kept going. The sun had dipped low, bleeding orange behind the horizon. Shadows reached long across the pavement. Cody didn't notice that the wind had stopped. Dead air, heavy, like a held breath. The mesquite trees stood still. No birds, no crickets. Just the crunch of tires over gravel at the roads. Shoulder. Then came the scream. It wasn't like something from a movie. It didn't sound human, but it wasn't an animal either. It was raw, sharp, and wet, like the throat making it was torn open while it screamed. It came from everywhere at once. No direction. It filled the cab of his truck, seemed to come from the vents, the radio, even from the glove box. Cody slammed the brakes. The truck jerked, stuttered, then died. Everything shut off. Engine, lights, radio. He was left sitting in silence that didn't feel natural. It felt staged, as if the world around him had hit pause. He reached for his phone. No signal. Of course. Cody tried the ignition again. Nothing. Not even a click. He cursed, popped the hood, and stepped out. The air was hotter than it had been. The kind of heat that presses down, not from the sun but from something above it. He opened the hood. The engine was fine. Nothing he could see was wrong. No smoke, no smells, no leaking hoses. But the battery, it looked bloated, like it had swelled under pressure. He'd seen that once, in a car struck by lightning. He heard the scream again, this time behind him. Closer. He turned. Nothing. The road stretched on in both directions. Empty. The sky was red now. Not sunset red. Blood red. Wrong red. He squinted into the haze. The trees looked farther away now, like they'd backed off. He slammed the hood down, muttering to himself, and got back into the cab. Locked the doors out of habit. Tried the key one more time. Click. That time, it clicked. Then for a second. The lights flickered on, and in the rearview mirror, something moved. He turned fast. Nothing. But the back seat felt wrong. Like someone had just been there. The air smelled sweet, like rotting peaches and mildew. Cody was no coward, but his hands were shaking. He reached for the glove box, pulled out a flashlight, and turned it on. The beam was weak, but it was something. He stepped out again. That mile seemed to stretch now, longer than before. And up ahead, maybe 100 yards, he saw a figure. It looked like a girl, no older than 10. Pale dress, long hair. Standing on the side of the road, arms by her sides. "Hey!" Cody shouted. "You okay?" No response. He walked forward. Step by step, boots scuffing the hot asphalt. "Kid, you lost?" Still nothing. No movement. But as he got closer, he saw her eyes. They were wrong. Too wide. Too dark. No whites. Just black. And her mouth sewn shut. The scream tore through the air again, but this time it didn't come from her. It came from beneath the road. A deep, tearing shriek, like the earth itself was trying to howl. Cody stumbled back. The girl didn't move, but something behind her did. A shape, big, too big, crawling across the road, dragging long limbs, scraping. Bone on pavement. He ran, got back to the truck, threw the door open, and screamed as he turned the key again. The engine roared. Headlights blinked on. The girl was gone. But for a second, just one, he thought he saw her reflection in the mirror. Sitting in the back seat, smiling. Cody didn't stop driving. Not until he hit Mathis. Not until he saw streetlights and people and heard the buzz of insects again. He sold the truck a week later. Wouldn't say why. Said he wouldn't drive that. Rode again, not for all the money in Texas. The mechanic who bought the truck, he died 6 days later. Brake failure. Highway wreck. Witnesses said they heard a scream just before the crash. Some say the road's cursed. Others say there's a debt to be paid for crossing it. But everyone agrees on one thing. That mile on FM 666, it screams. And the ones who hear it don't come back the same. Devil's Backbone was the kind of place that made you forget how close you were to other people. Just a 2-lane ribbon of winding asphalt cutting through the Texas hill country, hugged on either side by dense cedar scrub, live oak, and limestone ledges. The name came from the ridge itself, Devil's Backbone Scenic Drive, just north of Canyon Lake. Locals told stories about it, that it was haunted, that people vanished out there, that soldiers and settlers had bled into the rocks and never really left. But people tell stories like that about everywhere. Most of them, anyway. Andy didn't believe in ghosts. Not really. He was a surveyor with the Texas Department of Transportation, and his job was to inspect road integrity on rural stretches. Devil's Backbone had some crumbling shoulders and minor erosion. That was all. The job would take maybe 4 hours, and he figured he could do it solo and still make it home to San Marcos before dusk. He left his office at 1:47 p.m., according to the dashcam. That detail would become important later when they reviewed the footage. Not for what it showed, but for what it did. Single quotes T. Andy reached the ridge around 2:20. The sun was high. The road shimmered with heat and light oil slick. The kind of shine you get only in August, where the humidity holds you like a damp wool blanket. He parked at a gravel turnout marked only with a sun-bleached wooden post that said, PR 32. There were no other vehicles. Just the wind in the trees and the faint hum of cicadas buzzing like power lines. He grabbed his gear, clipboard, soil probe, laser level, and a bottle of Gatorade and started his walk. The first 2 miles were normal. His boots kicked up limestone dust. The trees leaned in close, forming shadowed tunnels that cooled the air and muted the light. The only thing he noted was the absence of birds. Not a single call, not even a flap. No vultures circling, no crows hopping along the fence line. Just the sound of his boots and breath. At 3:05 p.m., he paused. He wasn't sure why. He just stopped. Mid-step. A feeling ran through him, cold, even in that heat. A pressure behind the eyes, a static hum in his ears. He turned around. Nothing. But the feeling stayed. That prickly, hair-raising pressure that makes you feel watched. Andy shook it off. Probably dehydration, he told himself. He took a long drink, wiped his forehead, and kept walking. That's when he saw it. A man, maybe 100 yards behind him on the road, thin, wearing jeans and a white shirt that hung stiff like it had. Dried with salt. The man stood still, not walking, just watching. Andy raised a hand. The man didn't move. You all right? Andy called. No answer. The man stepped forward, then stopped again. Same distance. Andy squinted. There was something off. The man's head tilted at a strange angle, like a bird's. His arms hung low. Too low. The elbows were almost past his waist. Andy walked faster. He didn't run. Not yet. That wasn't the kind of man he was. He just moved quicker, looking back every minute. Each time he did, the man was the same distance behind. Always in the middle of the road. Always watching. At mile 4, Andy veered off the asphalt onto a private road he knew looped back to the highway. He figured if the man was just some drifter or tweaker, he'd lose interest. But the trees got thicker. The sun dimmed even though it wasn't sunset yet. Shadows pooled on the gravel like spilled ink. Andy turned again. No one. He stopped, heart racing. He laughed a little, trying to push the tension down. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe the heat had fried his brain. That's when he heard the whisper. It wasn't a voice exactly. More like wind, but shaped. A pressure against his eardrum. It said his name, just that. Andy. He spun around. The man was there, only now he was closer, 20 feet, face pale, lips black, eyes too wide, the whites stained yellow, the pupils thin. As slits. Andy stumbled backward, dropped his clipboard. The soil probe clanged on the gravel. He ran. No shame, no pause. Just flat out, lung-burning, knee-thrashing panic. He didn't look back. The trees blurred. The road felt longer, like it stretched out with every step. He reached the highway at 4:18. According to the dash cam, he sprinted up to the truck, flung the door open, and slammed it behind him. The camera footage shows him sitting there, eyes wide, mouth open, screaming, but there's no sound on the recording. Just static. Andy's report later said he sat for 10 minutes before starting the truck. But the dash cam shows the truck didn't move for 3 hours. They found claw marks on the inside of the windshield. Long, sharp gouges like from a crowbar. Or nails. He said he never touched the glass. He transferred out of field work 2 weeks later. Moved to the Houston office. Stopped driving alone. Started drinking again. Sometimes, if you pass through Devil's Backbone at night, especially in August, you'll see someone walking the shoulder, thin, stiff white shirt, watching. He doesn't wave. He doesn't speak. But if you stop, he might follow. And if he follows you, he never stops. Not until you hear your name whispered on the wind. Not until your breath comes in gasps, your heart pounds like a war drum, and the shadows around you move without wind. They say Devil's Backbone is just a name, but Andy says it has a spine and something walks it. The road seemed longer at night, like it had been pulled tight across the dark, empty spine of Texas. U.S. Route 281 was quiet just south of Lampasas, no traffic, no signs of life, just two kids in a rusting Toyota Corolla barreling down the blacktop. With nothing but the static of low-country radio and the occasional scream of cicadas to remind them they weren't completely alone, Ben and his girlfriend, Marley, were heading back from a friend's lake house party. They'd stayed too late. One too many beers, too many laughs, not enough gas. They weren't drunk, but they were definitely tired. And somewhere near 12:40 a.m., about 5 miles past a next service's 33 miles sign, the back tire blew. Not a pop, not a hiss, a low groaning sort of hump. Ben cursed and guided the car off onto the shoulder, gravel crunching beneath them. The headlights dimmed, flickered, then held. "I knew we should have filled up earlier," Marley mumbled, chewing her thumb. "It's not the gas," Ben said, grabbing the flashlight from the glove box. "Flat tire. I'll change it." They got out. The air was heavy, like it held water. It hadn't rained in days, but everything smelled damp, earthy, as if something had recently been unburied. Ben knelt by the rear wheel. Marley stood near the trunk, arms crossed, phone held high for a signal. No luck, just the blue glow of no. Service reflected in her glasses. "I'll get this done in 10, he said, trying to sound confident. But the lug nuts fought him, every one of them stiff, one stripped. The tire iron slipped, cutting his knuckles. He cursed and sucked the blood, spitting rust and grit into the gravel dot. Then the headlights flickered again. "Did you see that?" Marley asked. Ben didn't answer. He was too focused on the way the shadows from the trees across the road shifted. Not like wind, there was no wind. The shadows just moved. The brush beyond the barbed wire fence was dense. Mesquite, juniper, oak, tangled up in dead vines. Nothing that should have moved, but something did. There was a sound. A dragging, metallic scrape, like a chain pulled over dry stone. Then a whisper, faint, low. Just on the edge of hearing. It sounded like his name. Ben. He stood fast. Flashlight beam jerking toward the trees. Nothing. Just the thick wall of Texas brush, unmoving, unbroken. "You heard that?" Marley asked. Voice tight. "Probably a deer," he muttered. "Deer don't whisper names." Ben didn't answer. He went back to the tire. Wrenched the last lug nut off. The wheel didn't budge. Then something hit the roof of the car. A thud, like a dropped backpack. Or a body. Ben dropped the tire iron. Marley screamed. They both backed away. There was nothing there. The roof was empty. No dents, no blood, just a faint dusting of brown leaves. And the smell stronger now, like rotting leaves mixed with hot copper. "Get in," Ben said, voice cracking. They jumped inside, slammed the doors, and locked them. He tried the ignition. The engine coughed. Once, twice, then a long wheezing whine. It didn't turn over. And that's when the whisper came again. Marley's eyes were wide. "Ben, it said my name." They both looked forward. In the headlights, which were now oddly dim, as if underwater, something stepped out of the trees. It was tall, gaunt, human-shaped, but wrong. Its limbs were too long. Its head hung to one side like a snapped branch. Rusted chains dragged behind it, tangled around its legs, clinking as it moved, and its face, God, the face was just skin pulled too tight over bone, with no mouth and two black holes where the eyes should be. A scar stretched across its throat like a sewn-up smile. Ben threw the gear into drive, stomped the pedal. Nothing. The figure dragged itself forward. The headlights dimmed more, flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed them. The only light now came from Marley's phone, and even that faded to black. Ben pounded the wheel. Come on. Something scraped across the driver's side door. A long metal drag. Then a knock, soft, measured, like a polite visitor at 1 o'clock. Knock. Knock. 3 times. They both sat frozen, breathing shallow, praying. Then, slowly, the handle rattled. It didn't jerk, didn't pull, just
rattled. Like whatever was out there didn't need to open it?
It just wanted them to know it could. Marley screamed. The dome light flicked on, all by itself, casting a pale yellow over their faces. There was nothing at the window, but in the rearview mirror, Ben saw a hand. Inside. Reaching from the back seat. He turned fast, swung the flashlight. Empty. But the flashlight died in his hand. Ben opened the glove box, found the old box cutter. He didn't know what he'd do with it. Just needed something. Anything. Marley pulled her knees to her chest, whispering prayers. The whispering outside returned. Not words, just breathy syllables like an old cassette played backward. The car filled with the sound, pressing in from all sides. And then silence. Pitch black. Still. No footsteps. No chains. Just nothing. Ben looked at the clock. It blinked. 12:40. A . Same as before, then again. 12:40. It didn't change. We have to run, he said. Marley shook her head. It's still out there. Ben took her hand. I know. They opened the doors, ran into the trees. Branches clawed their faces. Thorns tore at clothes. But they didn't stop. Not until they found a fence, climbed it, kept running until lights appeared through the trees. A gas station. Old, flickering neon. Somehow still open. They burst inside, gasping, bleeding, eyes wide. The clerk just stared. You from the 281 flat? He asked, slow. Ben nodded. You know it? The man sighed. You ain't the first. What was it? The clerk looked past them, out the window, where the road twisted back into the woods. Some say it was a man who died chained in the sun. Some say it was a thing that used to be a man, but it always comes back at 12:40. Always. Ben looked at the clock above the register. 12:40. Still. Frozen. And in the glass of the cooler behind them, a reflection that didn't belong to either of them. Just a figure in chains, smiling without a mouth. The desert didn't begin at a hard line in Texas. It just sort of crept in first with the heat, then the dryness, then the emptiness. By the time you were an hour outside Van Horn, the landscape looked like God had forgotten to finish it. Just dust, wind, and the kind of heat that made the air shimmer like water. Cal and Jamie were halfway through a cross-country trip that had started with excitement and playlist battles and had, somewhere around Del Rio, turned into exhaustion. Dead phone batteries and the sour silence of couples who've been in a car too long. They weren't fighting. Not yet. But Jamie had that look. The one that meant she was 3 questions away from snapping. Cal knew better than to push it. They were low on gas, low on water, and somewhere east of Sierra Blanca. Just before the sun dipped behind the flat ridges, they saw it. A little station on the left side of US 90, just past an abandoned livestock pen and a cracked white sign that said, Wellspring, Texaco, since 1954. Finally, Jamie muttered. Cal pulled in, crunching gravel under the tires. The station looked like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting left out in the rain. Pale red siding, faded Coca-Cola signs, a dusty canopy hanging over 2 old mechanical pumps, the kind you still had to lift the lever on. An old man sat outside on a folding chair, long legs crossed, white beard down to his collarbone. He looked like the desert had raised him. They got out. The wind hit them like a furnace blast. Cal nodded. Evenin'. The old man didn't smile, just nodded back. Need fuel? Yeah, regular. Pump one's got it. His voice was. Sandpaper. Cal went to work. Jamie wandered inside. The store was small, but clean. Wood shelves. Neatly arranged canned beans, bottles of Coke in an old icebox. No music. Just the soft whine of electricity and the tick of a wall clock stuck at 3:17. Jamie grabbed some snacks, jerky, water, a cold Dr. Pepper, and rang the bell on the counter. No one came. She rang again, then a shuffle. A figure stepped from the back. A woman, probably in her 70s, with wiry gray hair pulled into a loose braid and a large turquoise ring on her finger. You're lucky, she said without smiling. Why's that? Jamie asked. The woman placed the water and soda into a paper bag, then looked up. Her eyes were pale, like river stones. We don't open late anymore, but tonight's a thin night. Jamie didn't know what that meant. She paid in cash and said thank you. The woman didn't answer. Outside, Cal was tightening the gas cap. The sky had darkened from gold to blood orange. Got your stuff? He asked. Yeah, let's go. They got in the car, turned out of the gravel lot, and drove maybe half a mile before Jamie realized she left her phone on the counter. Damn it, my phone. Cal sighed but flipped a U-turn. The dessert was quiet. Still, they drove back, past the livestock pen. And then, nothing. No gas station. No gravel lot. No red siding. No pumps. Just flat desert scrub and dust-blown asphalt. Cal slowed, then stopped, reversed. Nothing. Did we go too far? No, I'm sure it was right here, by that pen. Jamie pointed. They got out. The wind was stronger now. The smell of gasoline and dust hung in the air, but faint. Like a memory. Cal stepped into the brush where the station had been. The ground was uneven, soft. He kicked something metallic. He looked down. A rusted pump handle, half buried in the dirt, old, broken, with the Texaco star still faintly visible under the corrosion. Jamie picked up a fragment of wood, faded red. Paint, splintered like it had been through a fire. I don't understand, she whispered. The desert didn't answer. They stood there for a long moment, looking at the nothing. Then Cal walked back to the car, silent. Jamie followed. The doors slammed shut like punctuation. 10 minutes later, they hit the main road to Van Horn. They didn't speak until they checked into a cheap motel with flickering lights, and a woman behind the desk who looked at them like she'd already heard the story. Cal couldn't sleep. Not really. He sat outside smoking a cigarette, looking toward the horizon. An old man shuffled past the parking lot entrance. Long legs. Long beard. Same eyes. Cal stood, heart pounding. Hey, the man didn't answer. Just walked into the dark, melting. Into the desert like a shadow. The next morning, Jamie called the sheriff's office. Asked about the gas station off of Stash 90. The deputy paused. You sure it was open? Last night? Yeah. Around 7. Another pause. That place burned down in 98. Lightning strike. Whole family inside. Nothing left but metal and dirt. Cal took the phone from her. Then who the hell pumped our gas? Click. Later that week, Cal checked the car. The fuel gauge was full. The tires had a fresh coating of white gravel dust, the kind you only get from crushed limestone. Not asphalt. And the Dr. Pepper bottle Jamie had bought? It was glass. Thick. Embossed. The kind they stopped making in the 1970s. They never found. The receipt. Never found her phone. But every so often, Cal would dream of that station. The way the neon buzzed without power. How the clock never moved. And the feeling that someone behind the glass was still watching. and somewhere out in the desert. Past Van Horn, the wind still smells faintly of gasoline, dust, and burning wood. If you're lucky, you'll never see that place. If you're not, you won't find it twice. The sun was setting low over the desert when Miriam first saw the face in the rearview mirror. They were just west of Lajitas, a town so small and strange it felt like it had been built by ghosts and left to be forgotten. Their weekend trip to Big Bend had been spur of the moment, one of those let's reconnect things married couples do when the spark starts to flicker. Miriam and Sean had been married for 8 years, and for most of them, it had been fine. Comfortable, predictable. But lately, silence filled the car more than music or conversation. And now, on a winding desert road under a bleeding Texas sky, the silence had weight. Sean was driving. She watched him tap the steering wheel with one hand focused on the road ahead. The rental car, a silver Ford Escape, hummed steadily, its AC fighting against the dying desert heat. They hadn't passed another car in 40 minutes. Miriam leaned forward and adjusted the rearview mirror slightly, and froze. There was someone. In the back seat, a man. He was sitting perfectly still, centered between the headrests, grinning. His skin was pale, too pale. Not just light, but almost luminous like old porcelain. His eyes were wide and blank, mouth stretched into a grin that looked painted on. Lips dry, corners cracked. He didn't blink. Miriam gasped, clapping a hand to her mouth. Sean glanced over. What? She looked again. Empty. No one in the back seat. She shook her head. I thought I saw something. Sean smirked. That's what happens when you don't nap all day and drink bad gas station coffee. She forced a laugh. Yeah, probably. But it wasn't a trick of the light. She knew what she saw. They passed the old, closed-down trading post. It had looked abandoned for years, its wooden planks sun-bleached, one of the windows missing. A faded sign still hung above the porch. Welcome to Terlingua Ghost Tours. Want to stop there on the way back? Sean asked. She didn't answer. She was looking in the mirror again. The face was back. Same pale skin. Same too-wide grin. This time, his head was tilted slightly to the side, as if he were trying to hear their conversation. She jerked forward and twisted in her seat to look directly behind her. Empty. Completely, utterly empty. Miriam, Sean said, What the hell? There's someone in the back seat, she whispered. Sean slowed the car and pulled off onto the shoulder, dust spiraling around them. There's no one here, he said, and opened his door. Don't. She started, but he was already outside, walking around to the back. Opening the hatch. Nothing. He opened the rear passenger door. Swept his hand across the seat. No boogeyman, he said. Just a blanket and an empty bag of trail mix. Miriam opened her own door, stepped into the heavy air. The wind had died. The desert was holding its breath. She didn't want to get back in. Sean looked at her like she was being ridiculous. We're 20 minutes from the lodge, he said. We can be in bed with a glass of wine if you don't lose it on me now. She got in, not because she believed him, but because she didn't want to be outside with the desert watching her. The car pulled back onto the road. The sky was turning purple. She didn't look at the mirror, not at first. Not again until they passed the cattle skull nailed to a fence post. Then she peeked. The man was closer. His head was now slightly forward, almost as if he were leaning in between the seats. His grin had widened. There were teeth showing now. Too many. Long, yellow, as if he hadn't eaten in years but still enjoyed the idea. She screamed. Sean swerved slightly. Jesus! He's right there, she cried, pointing behind her. Sean whipped around, eyes scanning the seat. Nothing. Stop it, he said sharply. You're freaking me out. He's in the mirror, Sean, not the seat. The mirror. Sean looked at it. There was nothing. But when Miriam looked, the man raised a hand, not to wave. To touch the glass. And a second later, she felt a cold finger run slowly along her shoulder. She shrieked and slapped at herself, jerking away. Sean slammed the brakes. Miriam! God damn it! The car skidded to a stop on the edge of the desert road. Gravel popped. Dust rose in sheets. Sean stared at her. She was shaking. I don't know what it is, she said. But he's there. I swear. He's looking at me. Watching. He knows. I can see him. Sean sat back and stared through the windshield. And then he said something that turned her blood cold. You saw him too, didn't you? Sean didn't answer. He just started driving. Faster now. 10 over the limit. Then 15. Miriam didn't speak. The grin was in the mirror again. The man's face was closer. His head now nearly between theirs. She could almost smell him earth. Rot, coppery, and old. Sean didn't look at her. The car raced down the highway. Curves flying past, shadows stretching longer across the road. Then the music turned on. The car stereo flicked to life. A scratchy country song played, one she didn't recognize, but the lyrics, I'm ridden with you, baby, don't you cry. Gonna stay with you till the day you die. Miriam reached to shut it off. The screen blinked. The music kept playing. Ain't no distance that I can't ride. I'm right behind ya, just inside. She screamed and punched the screen. It cracked, but the music didn't stop. The rearview mirror shattered. Not from her hand. It cracked slowly, starting from the center, as if something behind the glass was pushing outward. Sean turned onto a dirt road, tires bumping hard. Where? Are we going? She yelled. Anywhere away from the road, he said. The desert rose around them. No lights, no signs, just dust and night. He stopped the car near a dry arroyo. They both got out, slammed the doors, but the engine didn't stop. It kept running. Then the doors unlocked. Click, click. They locked them again. The doors unlocked. A second later, the passenger door opened. Slowly. They didn't open it, but it opened. From the inside. Miriam didn't wait. She ran. Sean followed. They didn't look back until they'd reached a ridge, breathless and bleeding from cactus thorns. The car was dark now, but in the rearview mirror still hanging from the cracked windshield, they could see the man sitting in the front seat, still smiling. They left the car, walked 6 miles through the desert until a rancher picked them up. Later, the police found the vehicle. Empty. Except for one thing. The mirror. It was gone. Ripped clean off. And that night, when Miriam looked in her bathroom mirror at the lodge, she saw a faint handprint on the glass, pressed from the inside. Roy Dalton had been driving 18-wheelers for nearly 20 years, and he could count on one hand the number of times something truly rattled him. You saw things on the road, twisted wrecks, drunk drivers, weather so fierce it scraped thee. Paint off your rig, but there was a rhythm to the job. You learned when to trust your gut and when to shrug something off. The CB chatter was just another part of that rhythm, a familiar noise in the dark. It was just after 2 a.m. when Roy heard the voice. He was about 20 miles east of Pecos on I-20, a long flat stretch where the desert pressed in on both sides like a sleeping animal. The only light came from his high beams and the dull red glow of his instrument panel. The CB had been quiet most of the night. Just the usual trucker banter, earlier way stations, weather, rumors about construction near Odessa. Then came the voice. Small, broken. Help me. It was faint, like a whisper coming from the bottom of a well. Roy leaned in toward the radio. Say again? A pause. Then, I'm cold, please. Help. It was a child. A little girl. Roy sat back staring at the radio like it had just cursed at him. That didn't make sense. CBS didn't pick up kids, not unless they were messing around near a base station with an illegal amplifier. And even then, not out here. There was nothing for miles. He clicked the mic. "This is Long Haul, Roy. You all right, sweetheart? Where are you?" Another crackle. The voice again, closer. "Can't see. It's dark. My feet hurt." Roy felt the hairs on the back of his neck. "Stand up." He pulled to the side, rolling slowly onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under 20 tons of steel. The CB went silent. The desert outside was pitch black. He shut the engine down. Stepped out. The air smelled dry and metallic, like rain that never came. No wind. No bugs. Just the faint hum of the truck cooling down. "Hello?" he called, shining his flashlight across the scrub. Nothing. He walked a few feet off the road, crunching through dry grass and scattered rocks. His boots felt too loud. Then on the CB, still faint but unmistakable. "I see you." He spun. The cab light was still on. No one was near the truck. "I'm right here," the voice said. Roy's mouth went dry. He backed toward the truck. A shape darted past the beams of his flashlight fast. Low, too fast for a child. He stopped. "Who's out there?" he shouted. No answer. He climbed back into the cab, slamming the door shut and locking it. He stared into the mirrors, jaw tight. Then came the growling. It started low, vibrating the floor under his boots. A wet rumbling sound that didn't belong in the throat of anything human. The CB crackled again. "You stopped," the voice said, but it wasn't a little girl anymore. It was deeper now, thicker, mocking. "You shouldn't have stopped." Roy reached for the ignition. The key wouldn't turn. The lights flickered. The radio sputtered, and then the growling got louder. Closer. The passenger side mirror trembled. Something heavy hit the side of the cab once, then twice. As if testing the strength of the door, Roy grabbed the tire iron from behind the seat. Window fogged over on the outside. A handprint appeared. Small, too small. But with fingers too long, he sat frozen. Every muscle tight. Then the window shattered. Not exploded, shattered inward, as if something passed through it like mist and left glass behind. Roy swung the iron, yelling, striking at nothing. The growling filled the cab now, surrounding him, pressing in on all sides. He felt something brush the back of his neck. Cold. Wet. He screamed. Everything went black. The sun came up 4 hours later. A passing motorist found Roy's truck idling on the side of the highway. Lights on. Door open. But no sign of the driver. The logs were still on the dash. The CB was off, and written on the inside of the windshield, traced in a child's handwriting through the condensation, were the words, "I'm still cold." They found Roy 3 days later, naked, covered in bruises and dried blood, 10 miles into the desert, walking in circles and whispering a lullaby no one recognized. He wouldn't talk about what happened, wouldn't drive again. But late at night, in the quiet hours, before dawn, a few truckers still swear they hear her on the Sabi crying, calling. And they know better than to stop. The Llano rest stop wasn't on most maps anymore. Even the digital ones passed it by like it wasn't worth the server space. It sat about 5 miles south of the town proper, tucked off a sharp bend in Highway 16, half hidden behind a line of scrubby mesquite trees and a faded brown sign that read, "Scenic Overlook and Picnic Area." The picnic tables were warped, gray with age, and carved up with pocket knives' initials, dates, the occasional obscenity. One of the concrete benches had a crack straight down the middle, like it had been struck by lightning and left to rot. The trash bins were always empty, even though nobody maintained them. But it was the woman that gave the place its reputation. Locals knew the story. Travelers didn't, but they learned some the hard way. Nate Wascom was neither local nor tourist. He was a delivery driver for a regional parts distributor out of Waco, covering Central and West Texas. He didn't believe in ghost stories, didn't care for old wives' tales or TikTok ghost hunting garbage, just wanted his pay and his peace. He was 2 years sober, newly divorced, and the kind of man who spoke more with his headlights than his voice. That night, he was headed south from Brady after a late drop-off, trying to make Fredericksburg before crashing at a cheap motel and starting the route again at dawn. It was just after 1 a.m. when he saw the sign for Lano. His stomach growled. The energy drink he'd crushed back in San Saba had started to curdle. He needed air, a break, a piss. Then he saw it. The old rest stop. He hadn't remembered it from the route before, but the shoulder was wide and the turn felt right. The lights from the highway dimmed behind him as he pulled in, the crunch of gravel echoing like firecrackers under the tires. He stepped out. The air was thick, but still. The smell of creosote and something else sweeter, like crushed flowers. And wet grass lingered faintly. Moonlight spilled across the picnic area, silvering the edges of the benches and casting hard shadows under the trees. And then he saw her, sitting alone at the farthest table, facing the highway. A woman in white, not stark white, more the color of bone. Her dress was long, frayed at the hem. Her hair fell over her face in wet ropes. She didn't move. He almost called out. Almost. But something stopped him. He lit a cigarette, half expecting her to vanish in the puff of smoke like something from a movie. But she stayed, still. Quiet. And then, as if hearing his doubt, she stood. Nate froze. The woman turned slowly and looked at him. Her face was pale, but not inhuman. Not at first. There was something old in her expression, though. Not elderly, just worn, like leather left out in the rain too long. Her lips moved. "I need a ride," she said. Her voice was soft and flat. "Just up the road." Nate didn't move. "You okay, ma'am?" She nodded once. "Please." He swallowed hard. Looked around. No other cars. No signs of a breakdown. No backpack. No shoes. Just her. He didn't want to let her in, but he didn't want to leave her alone either. "All right," he said, walking toward the truck. "I'll take you as far as Lano. You got someone waiting?" She didn't answer. Just slid into the passenger seat like she belonged there. Her skin was cold. He could feel it through the air. The cab felt smaller now. He turned the key. The engine hesitated, then caught. They pulled back onto the road. "Where you headed?" he asked. "Just a mile," she said. "That's all. All right." He glanced over. Her eyes were closed. She looked peaceful. But the dashboard clock had stopped. 1:04. A dot and dot. He tapped it. Nothing. They passed the bend in the road. Something shifted in the air. Like pressure. Nate felt his ears pop. The trees thinned. Moonlight poured in, too bright, too white. And then she spoke again. "This is it." Nate slowed. There was nothing but a gravel turnout and a fence broken down in places. On the other side, a low ditch, overgrown with wildflowers. "Here?" he asked. She nodded. He pulled over. She opened the door. Cold. Air rushed in. She stepped out and stood by the fence. Nate waited. She didn't move. "You want me to wait with you?" She turned to him. Her face had changed. The skin was pale now, bone white. Her eyes were hollow, not empty, but deep. Like wells dug too far. "You already did," she said. "You were the last." Then she vanished. No sound. No light. Just gone. The air warmed slightly. The clock blinked back on. 1:04. Nate sat there for a long time. Then he saw it. Across the road, hidden in the brush, was a wooden cross. Weathered. Cracked. A name barely visible in the moonlight. Alyssa May. Riley. 1987 to 2009. Flowers long dead in rusted vases. A child's toy, half a stuffed bear, faded and half buried. She died here, right here. He didn't sleep that night. Didn't stop in. Fredericksburg. Just kept driving. 2 weeks later, he mentioned it to another driver at a truck stop near Kerrville. An older guy, leather face, half his teeth missing. "Lano rest stop," the man said. "You saw her. You've seen her too?" "No," the man said, "but I've heard. She don't show up unless she needs to. They say when her name gets forgotten, she starts showing up again, reminding people." Riding with him, just for a mile. Nate never took Highway 16 again, but sometimes, even on other roads, he checks the passenger seat in his mirror, just to make sure it's still empty. They were just south of Waco when they saw him. It was close to midnight, and the highway was mostly empty, just the occasional flicker of taillights up ahead or the white glare of an oncoming semi cresting a hill. The air was thick and wet, the kind of June night in Texas where the humidity clings to your clothes like second skin and even the pavement seems to sweat. David was driving. Erica had her bare feet on the dash, one earbud in, humming quietly to something synthy and slow. They'd been on the road since noon, heading from Denton to San Antonio to visit David's older brother, the one with the new baby they hadn't met yet. The plan was to crash at a cheap motel around Austin, wake up early, and finish the last hour or two with fresh coffee and podcasts. But the night was dragging. They were tired, the road felt too long, and when the headlights caught the man walking along the shoulder just past mile marker 327, David slowed almost without thinking. The hitchhiker stood perfectly still as they approached. Thin, maybe 6 feet tall, dark clothes, no backpack, no sign. Just his thumb hanging low at his side and a sort of expectant stillness about him, like he'd been waiting for them specifically. "Don't," Erica said automatically, pulling her earbud out. David slowed anyway. "It's the middle of nowhere," he said. He could be stuck. It's always the middle of nowhere when someone gets murdered in stories like this. But something in David's chest twinged a tug of guilt, maybe, or that old stupid urge to do the right thing. He rolled down the window. "You all right?" he called. The man stepped forward. His face was shadowed by the brim of a dusty ball cap, but his posture was loose, non-threatening. "Need a ride?" David asked, a small nod. The man opened the back door and climbed in without a word. The smell hit them immediately like copper and wet dirt. Erica wrinkled her nose and looked. "Back long walk?" she asked. The man didn't answer. He sat with his hands folded on his knees, face still partially shadowed. In the rearview mirror, David caught flashes of a beard, pale skin, and something else he couldn't quite place, something in the eyes. Glassy, maybe. Too wide. Too still. "What's your name?" David asked. No reply. Erica turned down the music. "You got a destination, man? Or just—" The man leaned forward slightly. David tensed without meaning to. But the hitchhiker just pointed, silently, at the highway ahead. "All right," David said, a little uneasy. "We'll go as far as Temple. You can figure it out from there." The hitchhiker sat back. The next 15 minutes passed in silence. No music, no chatter. Just the low hum of tires on asphalt and the sense of something wrong baking slowly in the cab like sour heat. The air smelled worse now, more metallic, like the inside of a rusted pipe. David glanced at Erica. She was staring straight ahead. Arms folded, one hand digging into her own skin like she was trying not to panic. And then the temperature dropped. It wasn't dramatic, just a subtle chill that slid in from the floorboards and seeped into their legs. The AC wasn't on. The vents were closed. David adjusted the mirror. The back seat was empty. He blinked. Looked again. Empty. He jerked his head around, still empty. What the hell? He whispered. Erica turned. What? Where did he go? She looked. Nothing. The back seat was bare. No door sound. No movement. But the window hadn't rolled down. David pulled onto the shoulder, heart pounding. They got out. Opened the back door. No one. No sign of exit. No footsteps in the gravel. No noise, but on the seat a long smear of blood. Dark, fresh. Still tacky. Erica screamed and stumbled back. David stood frozen. There were no wounds, no broken glass, no rips in the seat. Just the blood. Long and slick, like someone had sat there. While dying, they drove to the next gas station in silence. Left the car running while David told the clerk to call the sheriff. When the cops came, the blood was still there. They took photos, swabbed the seat, checked for prints. Nothing matched anyone in the system. No signs of forced entry or exit. The deputy said, "Y'all sure you didn't hallucinate this guy?" "We let him in," David said. "He was there. He sat in the back." Erica nodded. He pointed down the road. He didn't speak. "But he was there." The deputy just shook his head. "No one's been reported missing tonight. Closest town's back the way you came. Ain't nothing out here but deer and bad luck." They got back on the road after a while, shaken but too tired to do anything else. Erica didn't speak again until they were almost in San Antonio. "Do you think he was real?" she asked. David didn't answer, because that night, after they parked at his brother's house and went inside, David popped the trunk to grab their bags and saw something resting on top of his duffel. Cap, dusty, faded, still wet with blood. Burned it in the backyard, and no matter how many times he cleaned the back seat, the stain kept returning. Just faintly, like someone had never really left. There are parts of El Paso they don't put on maps. Miles of infrastructure built decades ago, tunnels for floodwater, rail switchbacks, long-forgotten maintenance corridors snaking beneath the city like arteries, never properly documented and mostly sealed. Mostly. Kara and Dylan had been driving south on US 54 when the GPS started rerouting. There'd been an accident up ahead, something big, based on the cloud of black smoke coiling into the desert sky. Fire trucks screamed past them. Sirens, flashing lights, detour signs hastily set up at the last overpass. The sun was dropping. Fast, soaking everything in orange, flattening the mountains into sharp black teeth against the west. "Damn it," Dylan muttered, squinting at the screen. "It wants us to exit on Yandel, then take some side access?" Kara leaned forward. "That's not a street. Look, it just says frontage utility and then cuts out. Maybe it connects through?" Kara glanced out the window. The other drivers were all stopping, piling off to gas stations or looping back toward Montana Avenue. But their car rolled on, the only one following the barricade cones down a service. Lane no wider than a driveway. Concrete swallowed them. A ramp curved gently down between retaining walls stained black with time. The sounds of traffic disappeared above them. The GPS screen flickered, then blinked out. No signal. Just a frozen blue arrow sitting still on a gray void. "Perfect," Dylan said. They passed beneath a low steel gate bent open, rusted through. The tunnel yawned ahead, tall enough for a small truck, lit only by faded orange bulbs spaced unevenly. Along the ceiling, graffiti lined the walls, layers of it, spanning decades. Some gang tags, some in Spanish, some in strange symbols Kara didn't recognize. Dylan drove slow. The further they went, the more the air thickened, like damp wool. It smelled of mold, rust, and something underneath, like something left too long in the dark. Kara rolled down her window. "I don't think we should be down here. You think? Pull over." "For what?" "I need a second." He sighed but stopped. The tunnel curved ahead, and the light from the entrance had long since vanished. It felt like they were inside the body of some sleeping beast. She stepped out. The floor was damp underfoot. Her boots echoed sharp and alone. Then something echoed back. Not her footsteps, but a shuffle, like a bare foot dragging across concrete. Then again. Kara froze. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Dylan stepped out. "What? Bat?" "Just listen." They stood still. Nothing. Then softer this time, the same shuffle. Then a whisper, too faint to understand, but close. Dylan opened the back door, grabbing the flashlight they kept under the seat. Clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark like a sword, but it didn't reach the end of the tunnel. "Come on," Kara sighed. "Let's go back. We'll wait out the crash." "We're already halfway through," he lied. He didn't know. The tunnel could stretch for miles. Still, they got in and drove on. At least, they thought they were driving on. The tunnel never seemed to change. Same walls, same stains, same curve. The light outside never returned. No junctions. No signs. "Where?" "Going in circles," Kara said. "I'm serious. There haven't been any turns." "Then how the hell?" The car jolted. Then died. The engine cut out. The lights dimmed. The radio fizzed into static. "Great," Dylan muttered. He turned the key. Nothing. Kara checked her phone. No service. They sat in silence, listening. Then the static from the radio changed. It formed into breath. Inhale. Exhale. Then stop. Kara shrieked and shut it off. The breath continued. In the cabin, right behind them, they turned slowly. Nothing. But the back seat smelled like wet dog and rotting leaves. Kara grabbed the flashlight again, opened the door, and stepped into the dark. "Where are you going?" Dylan hissed. "We need to find a way out." "There is no." Then the flashlight went out. The bulb didn't break. The battery didn't die. It just went out. Something moved behind them. Fast. Low. Dylan shouted, turned, swung the useless flashlight. Kara stumbled back into the car. That's when they heard it. Footsteps. More than one set. Close. Then the scratching started. Nails on concrete, on metal, on glass. The car rocked. Then something pressed against the rear window. A face, but not a human one. Eyes, too far apart. Skin stretched tight and gray. No lips. Just rows of teeth. Then it grinned. Kara screamed. Dylan kicked the car into gear. It roared back to life. Headlights flared, and the tunnel was gone. They were on a normal street, just outside the downtown core. Lights, traffic, air. The entrance behind them was gone, replaced by a chain-link fence and a field. No tunnel. No signs. Just tire marks on the road, and a faint smear of something dark on the back window. They didn't stop driving until they were halfway to Las Cruces. That night, they both dreamt of the same thing, being pulled down into a hole that had no bottom. And something whispering, "We remember you." They were somewhere west of Marathon when it happened, just a mile past the last rusting cattle gate, where the desert flattens into something like a forgotten sea. No waves. No wind, just dry, unmoving scrubland and jagged teeth of rock poking from the sand like the bones of something long dead. Derek was driving. Jenny was asleep in the passenger seat of their camper van, curled into her blanket with one bare foot sticking out like a flag. They'd left Austin 3 days earlier, heading out to Big Bend for a kind of reset. They were both worn out from the city, from each other. This trip was supposed to fix something, or at least buy them enough silence to remember what was worth fixing. The sun was just starting to dip below the western ridge, turning the landscape into black silhouettes and boiling gold. The road narrowed into cracked pavement, no striping, no shoulder, just dirt and rocks and the occasional roadkill. most of it too dry to smell. That's when the camper hit it. A thump, then another, not like a pothole. This had give. Oh wait. To it, Derek hit the brakes. Jenny jerked awake, eyes wide. What the hell was that? I don't know. He pulled over. The van's engine grumbled as it idled in the heat. I think we hit something. They stepped out. The air was bone dry and stank of scorched earth. Derek walked to the back, flashlight in hand. It didn't take long to find it. A mound. Not of dirt, but of fabric. Something buried shallowly in the sand just beside the road. Loose threads trailing like roots. Denim. Faded red flannel. A boot. He turned it over with his foot. A hand fell out. Dried. Mummified by the desert. Jenny screamed and stumbled back. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Back in the van, Derek said. Now. They drove without stopping until the sun vanished and the night dropped like a stone. The desert turned black around them, endless and full of nothing. Their nerves didn't calm. Every mile stretched out longer than the last. Jenny kept checking the mirror. Derek's hands wouldn't stop trembling. What if someone's looking for him? She whispered. We didn't see a face, Derek said. It could have been anything. But it wasn't, Derek. You know it wasn't. They parked at a primitive campground outside Alpine. No lights, no ranger. Just a picnic table, a fire ring, and silence. The kind of place no one bothered with. It was meant to be a free stop for wanderers, but it felt abandoned, unused. Jenny didn't eat. Derek barely drank his beer. They lay in bed, the van too quiet, too hot, the wind outside whispering against the metal. Then came the knock. Soft. Right by the back door. 3 slow taps. Then nothing. Derek sat up. Jenny was already awake, eyes wide in the dark. You heard that? He whispered. She nodded. He reached for the flashlight, turned it on, opened the door. Nothing. But in the dirt 3. Indentions. Faint. Like someone kneeling. They left at first light. Didn't speak much that day. Just drove. Long, flat stretches of 2-lane highways cutting through Texas like veins. The silence thickened. Jenny stared out the window. Derek kept checking the mirrors. The wind picked up dust, but the roads remained empty. That night, they stopped near Sanderson. Same deal, empty camp, no amenities. Just a pull-off by the dry bed of a creek. Jenny refused to sleep by the door. Derek didn't argue. Sometime after midnight, it started again. Knock. Then something else. A scrape. Like nails on the siding. Derek stayed still, listening. Breath held. Another knock, this time higher up. Like someone standing tall, palm flat on the aluminum. Jenny sobbed quietly into her pillow. The next morning, there were handprints on the windows. Filmy. Faint. But they're too long. Too thin. They didn't stop again. Drove 12 straight hours. Through Del Rio, past Uvalde, all the way to San Antonio. Slept in a hotel. Paid extra to park the camper in a fenced lot. But the knocking followed. It came on the 3rd. Night 2:13 a.m. Just like before. Knock. Then the voice from under the van. Low. Guttural. Like rocks shifting in a throat that hadn't used words in years. You found me, Jenny screamed. They left the hotel in seconds, bags still inside. The camper reeked. Not of gas or oil, but of something dead. Sweet and sour, like rotten flowers left too long. They abandoned it in the parking lot of a gas station east of Houston. Bought a bus ticket. Never looked back. 3 days later, it was found flipped on its side, doors open. Windows shattered. No one inside. But written across the inside of the windshield, scrawled in dirt and something darker, were 5 words. Was never buried deep. They don't talk about it now. But sometimes, when Jenny wakes in the middle of the night in their apartment in Dallas, she swears she hears it again. Soft. Knock. 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 And that voice. I'm still walking. Route 84 runs long and flat through the hard middle of Texas, the kind of highway that seems to stretch on forever in both directions, bordered by dying grass, leaning fence posts, and rusted-out sheds that haven't had owners since the Reagan administration. Between Snyder and Sweetwater, there's a 50-mile stretch where the road gets weird too quiet, too straight, too goddamn empty. Locals whisper about it in gas stations and tire shops. Drivers pass stories around like road maps, none of them written down, none of them confirmed. But they all mention one thing. The hitchhiker. Clayton and Mitch weren't the type to listen to ghost stories. Two good OL boys from Amarillo hauling a flatbed loaded with pipe to Abilene. Their conversations usually stuck to hunting, football, and how much they hated their exes. The old Dodge Dually they were driving had a busted AC and a cracked windshield, but she ran solid, and the two of them had been making deliveries together for over a decade. Route 84 wasn't anything special, just another stretch of heat-baked asphalt between two paychecks. Until they saw him. It was just past dusk. The sun was already down, but the sky still held that burnt orange glow that makes everything look like it's been set on fire from below. The road shimmered, warped by the day's heat, and the land on either side stretched out flat and featureless. He's barefoot, Mitch muttered, eyes narrowing. Clayton squinted. What, that guy? There, right shoulder. Sure enough, there was a figure walking the edge of the road, thin, tall, covered in dust from head to toe. Not just dirty, he looked like he'd been rolling in ash. Clothes caked and frayed. No pack, no hat, no shoes, arms hanging limp at his sides. And his head was tilted back slightly, as if he were smiling. Except as they got closer, they realized he didn't have a face. At least not one with eyes. Just two smooth depressions, where his sockets should have been. Like the skin had never been carved for vision at all. His mouth was wide, too wide, stretched open in a grin that showed teeth too uniform to be real. Don't stop, Clayton said. Wasn't planning to. They sped up. Past the figure without a word, both men locking eyes forward like ignoring. It would make it less real. But just before the man was out of view, he moved, just his head, turning to follow them. No eyes. But still watching. 10 minutes of silence passed. Clayton finally broke it. You saw that, right? Mitch nodded. Yup. Didn't cast a shadow. I know. Jesus. Then a sound came from the truck bed. A thump. Soft. Barely audible. They both looked at each other. Another thump. Then a drag, like something heavy being pulled across the metal. Mitch's hand went to the glove box. Pulled out the .38 revolver they kept there for rattlesnakes and weirdos. You think he was on the road, Clayton said. You saw him on the road. Mitch didn't answer. Just rolled the window down and leaned out, flashlight in hand. Shined it into the bed. Nothing. Just coiled rope and a few scattered pieces of scrap metal. Then the flashlight flickered. And in that brief second before the light died completely, Mitch swore he saw a hand, pale, long-fingered, gripping the edge of the toolbox. He yanked his arm back in and slammed the window. Something's back there. Clayton pulled over fast. The truck screeched onto the dirt shoulder, dust flying. They both jumped out, shined lights. Checked everything. The bed was empty. Clean, even, too clean. The dust that had been there when they loaded in Snyder was gone, like it had been licked off. What the hell? Clayton muttered. Then the truck doors locked, not from the key, from inside. They both stared as the headlights flared on without the key in the buffet. Ignition dot and the engine started dot the truck idled dot waiting dot Mitch grabbed the handle dot yanked dot would and open. Then the windows fogged from inside. All four at once, and a single word appeared, written in the mist on the passenger side glass. Ride. They didn't sleep that night. Walked 10 miles back to a diner off a farm road. Called the sheriff. Reported the truck stolen. It was found. The next morning outside Abilene. Doors wide open. Engine still running, but the bed was full of footprints, bare, too long, deep, like someone had stood there for hours, unmoving. The prints stopped at the edge of the bed and never touched the ground. The sheriff asked questions. They lied. But that night, at the cheap motel they checked into, Mitch woke to a sound at the window. He pulled the curtain. There he was, the hitchhiker. No shoes, no eyes, no shadow, just grinning. And the next morning, Clayton was gone. No sign of forced entry. The bed unslept in, but outside, tracked faintly through the dust, were bare footprints, heading west, back toward Route 84. Back toward whatever waits out there, walking the shoulder, smiling in the dark. The diner sat just west of the main drag in Alpine, Texas, where the desert started to stretch out wider than your eyes could follow and the mountains bunched up like sleeping giants. It wasn't much to look at. Tin roof, weather-worn signs, an old green and yellow diner light that flickered even in daylight, but the locals knew it, or used to. Most of the regulars stopped showing up sometime around the mid-90s. Some said the cook went crazy. Others said there was a bad accident in the kitchen and the whole place just got off. But the real reason, the one no one wanted to say out loud, was the jukebox. It was a big Wurlitzer Model 1015. Neon lights curved in perfect arcs around its frame, glowing dimly even when the power was out. The thing had survived a fire back in '67 and a flood in '85. Nobody could remember when it was first brought in. It was just always there, always humming. Even when the jukebox wasn't playing, you'd feel this low, buzzing hum in your chest like the thing had a heartbeat. And when it did play, when someone dropped a coin in the slot, the music was wrong. Not off-key or scratchy. Wrong in time. The songs weren't on any radio. Weren't on vinyl, tape, CD, or Spotify. Old-timers would sometimes blink and say, "Damn, I haven't heard that since '49. Or, "I thought that song was lost in the fire at the station. Sometimes they'd say nothing, just stand up and leave mid-burger, like the sound brought something back they didn't want. And then there were the people who didn't leave. See, the diner stayed open late, supposedly 24 hours, but nobody worked the overnight shift anymore. Not since Jerry, the night fry cook, walked out back to take a smoke break and never came back. When they found his body 3 days later, he looked like he'd been dead a week. Skin shriveled like he'd been in the sun too long, eyes clouded over like milk, and both ears stuffed with greasy wads of napkins, like he'd tried to block something out. Like he'd tried to stop listening. It was after Jerry that Danica started closing early. She was the manager, owner, waitress, and short order cook rolled into one since the others stopped showing up. She didn't have anywhere else to go. The diner had been in her family since before Route 90 was paved, and she felt like she owed it to her dad to keep the lights on. But even she didn't touch the jukebox anymore. The jukebox didn't seem to care. Every so often, usually after sunset, usually when the wind shifted just right through the Davis Mountains, the jukebox would start up on its own. A coin would clink inside, though no one ever saw who dropped it. Then the arm would slide across the dusty rows of 45s, and one would drop. And then came the music. It was always a sad song, never upbeat. crooning, warbling voices that sounded like they'd been recorded underwater or in the middle of a thunderstorm. Sometimes you could hear a woman sobbing in the background. Other times, if you listened close, there were footsteps, like someone pacing behind the melody. And always, the voices of the dead. Danica tried to ignore them, the figures that showed up when the music played. At first, it was just a trick of the eye. A man sitting in the corner booth wearing a pinstripe suit no one had worn since the Eisenhower years. A woman at the counter with a beehive hairdo and a cherry red coat, sipping a milkshake she hadn't ordered. They didn't talk. They didn't move. They just listened to the jukebox. Then one night, 2 weeks ago, one of them spoke to her. Danica had just finished wiping down the counter. It was late, too late, and the jukebox started again, unprovoked. A slow jazz number she didn't recognize oozed from the speakers like molasses. Her hands went cold. She didn't turn to look. Didn't need to. She knew someone was behind her. "You got any cherry pie left, sweetheart?" The man's voice was smooth, practiced, too perfect. Like an actor reading lines he'd read 1,000 times. She turned slowly. The man was pale. Not like sick pale, but dead pale. Wax dummy pale. He wore a blue suit, neatly pressed, and his hair was oiled back like it was prom night. He smiled. Teeth too white, too straight. His eyes were all wrong. Too dark, no shine. Just wet glass and deep sockets. I don't," she stammered. His smile didn't change. He just tapped the counter with one finger, and she heard the clink of a coin sliding across the jukebox again. Another song started. This one older, static heavy. She couldn't make out the words. Behind him, the diner filled. Booths that had been empty for months now had couples in them. Soldiers, truckers, housewives, all dressed like they stepped out of another time. None of them were talking, all staring at her, all listening to the music. Danica backed into the kitchen and locked the door. She didn't leave until dawn. When she stepped out again, the jukebox was still playing, but now it was humming a lullaby, a child's lullaby. She unplugged the damn thing, ripped the cord clean out of the wall. It kept playing. Last Thursday, a traveler came through. Name was Ben. Young guy, maybe 25, with a backpack and a Nikon slung around his neck. Said he was doing a photo series on dying towns. Thought the diner would be perfect. He ordered eggs and hash. Talked to Danica about the towns. History. Asked if he could take a picture of the jukebox. She said no. He waited until she was out back unloading milk crates, then did it anyway. Danica found his camera sitting on the counter. Still warm, still running. She looked through the viewfinder. There were 37 photos of the jukebox. And in every one, a different face looked back through the glass. Faces that weren't his, weren't hers. Faces no one alive had seen in decades. The last picture was of Ben, but his eyes were rolled back and his mouth hung open like he was screaming. There was no sign of him. No body. No bag, just the camera. And one of the booths, the one closest to the jukebox, had a half-drunk glass of water and an empty plate of eggs where no one had sat all morning. Danica closed up that day. Locked the doors, nailed boards over the windows, taped up a sign that said closed for good. She thought it would be over. But tonight, the jukebox plays again. Lights glowing through the slats in the boarded windows. Songs she's never heard, but somehow knows the words to. Songs that make her chest tighten, her ears ring, her eyes water. And outside, parked cars fill the lot. Rusted Fords, old Chevys. Some missing plates, some missing doors. But all of them waiting for the music. Because the Alpine Diner never really closed. Not for the ones who remember the songs. Not for the ones who never left. And inside, the jukebox waits. Still humming, still playing, and it's your song next. The first time Levi saw the dog, it was standing dead still in the center of the two-lane back road that cut through the empty farmland between Coleman and Santa Ana. It was dusk, the hour when the sun slid low and painted the Texas sky with bruised reds and dusty purples. Levi had just finished his delivery at a ranch off FM 2633 and was heading back to Brownwood in his beat-up '98 Dodge. The air inside the cab was thick with heat and the stale scent of fast food wrappers and sweat, and the only sound was the low static hum of the radio tuned to a dead frequency. He saw the dog long before he came up on it. Not because it moved, it didn't, but because it stood like a damn statue, black against the fading sky, tail stiff, head low, watching him. Levi slowed the truck. He figured it was some farmer's mutt, lost or maybe feral, probably half blind and deaf, but when he got closer, the thing didn't budge. Its eyes reflected the headlights like polished coins, and for a split second, just a second, he thought the eyes glowed red. Not the way an animal's eyes shine in light, but a true, dull red like embers. Then it blinked, turned slowly, and padded off into the mesquite thickets on the side of the road, but not unheard of. What stuck with Levi, though, was the sound. Just as the dog stepped off the road, the radio crackled to life and a voice. Not a DJ, not a song. Just whispered, clear as crystal, "Don't stop on this road again." Then static returned. Levi hit the volume knob, checked the frequency, still 102.5, the classic rock station, but there was nothing. Just snow. The hairs on his neck stood up. He lit a cigarette with shaky fingers, told himself it was just fatigue, heat stroke maybe, and kept driving. The second time it was raining. A week had passed. He hadn't forgotten the dog. How could he? But he'd convinced himself it was a trick of the light. A stray with some freak reflection. That whisper? Hell, probably a glitch. Radios out here picked up everything from trucker chatter to old stations still broadcasting gospel from tin sheds. But that night, a storm had rolled in from the west, mean and low and black. Lightning painted the landscape in stark flashes, revealing lonely windmills and skeletal fences, the kind that looked like they were clawing at the sky. Levi was coming back late from another delivery, driving the same route, when the rain started falling in sheets so thick it looked like the whole world was being washed away. He saw the dog again, same spot, same stance, except this time it was snarling. Its lips curled back to reveal yellow human-like teeth. Not just canines. Teeth that looked too neat, too even. Levi slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded slightly on the wet asphalt. He blinked through the windshield wipers, swearing, but the dog was gone. Just vanished. No trace of it on the road, no paw prints. In the wet dirt on either side. Then the growling started, not outside. Inside the cab, he turned slowly. The passenger seat was empty. The back seat too. But the sound low, guttural. A sound that belonged in a throat too deep and too wide to be any normal animal. Echoed like it was coming from inside the dashboard dot, and then the engine died. Everything went dark. No lights, no radio, no wipers. Just the rain and that damn growl still vibrating deep in the bones of the truck. Levi reached for the ignition, turned the key. Nothing. Tried again. The growl got louder, more urgent dot, and then it stopped. Everything did. The storm, the sound. Even the rain. It was like someone had hit pause on the whole world dot, and from the passenger side, someone whispered, "Turn here." He looked over. The dog was there, sitting upright like a person. Its eyes glowed, its mouth opened, and inside there was another face, not a dog's, a man's. pale, bloated, and smiling. Levi screamed and scrambled out of the truck, falling into the mud and crawling backward, half mad with terror. When he looked back, the truck was empty. The lights flickered on. The radio buzzed again. Faint music, some old country song about broken hearts and long roads. He didn't get back in right away. He walked 5 miles to the nearest gas station. Showed up caked in mud and blood where he'd scratched himself on the barbed wire fence. When he told the clerk what he saw, the man just stared at him and said, "You saw the dog, huh?" Levi didn't sleep for days. He didn't take that road again. Not for a month. But the thing about West Texas is that the roads are few and jobs are fewer. Eventually, he needed the money. Had to make a run to the same ranch. He drove in the daylight, told himself nothing could happen while the sun was out, but the dog was waiting. Not in the road this time, in the field out. It walked alongside the truck as he drove. No matter how fast he went, it kept pace. Its legs didn't move. Normally, too long, too fluid. Like it wasn't walking at all, just gliding. Levi made the delivery, got out of there fast, refused the iced tea the rancher's wife offered, and didn't stop till he got back home. That night, he heard scratching at the back door. He lived in a small trailer on the edge of town, surrounded by empty lots and scrub. No reason for a dog to be there, but the scratching kept on. He looked through the PEEPHOLE dot nothing dot, a low, hollow sound like something trying to remember how a bark should sound. Like it had heard it once, long ago, and was imitating it. He didn't open the door. The next day, he found paw prints on the floor of the trailer, inside, leading from the door to his bed, then disappearing. No broken windows, no open doors, and the smell, like old blood and wet fur and something worse, something rotting. He called a priest, then a vet. Neither could help. The final time, Levi wasn't driving. He was walking. Just a short stretch to the convenience store, late evening, when he saw headlights coming down the road. The truck was his, but he had sold it 2 weeks ago to a junkyard in Abilene. Inside, behind the wheel, was the dog, or something wearing its skin. Its snout was twisted, split down, the middle like 2 mouths trying to become one. And in its eyes, not just red, but burning, he saw the road reflected back at him. Not the road he was standing on. The other one. The cursed one. And the whisper came again, "Turn off the highway." This time, it wasn't asking. It was telling. They found Levi's body 3 days later, down an embankment off FM 2633. The truck he sold was gone. His throat had been ripped open, but there were no tracks, no blood trail. Just a faint set of paw prints burned into the asphalt, glowing faintly in the moonlight, and then vanishing as the wind swept over the highway. Locals still talk about it. Some say the dog's a spirit. Others say it's something older. Something born from the blood-soaked soil and the forgotten bones buried beneath those quiet fields. But the truth? That road knows your name once you've heard the bark. The dog doesn't just haunt the highway. It owns it. And if you hear it growl, if you feel the air shift and the lights flicker, it's already too late. Because what follows ... isn't a dog. And it never was. The highway was empty except for the hum of Caleb's old Chevy Silverado, and even that felt like an intrusion into the quiet. He'd been driving since 9 p.m., making his way north from Abilene after a job interview that ran late. The highway signs told him he was near Wichita Falls, maybe 20 miles out, and the stretch he was on somewhere along Highway 287 was dark as pitch. No other cars, no visible gas stations, and not even the glow of distant farmhouses. Just the occasional fence line and black trees like twisted figures under the pale. Slice of moonlight. His phone had died half an hour ago. No charger. No GPS. Just instinct and a glove box map that looked like it came out of a history book. Caleb rubbed at his eyes, blinked hard, and then checked the clock on the dash, 2:12 a.m. The second he looked up again, he noticed them dot lights, not headlights. Not taillights, not any lights that belonged on a car. These were small, pure white orbs, maybe 3 of them, hovering low to the pavement about 50 yards behind his truck. No sound. No beam. No glare. Just 3 steady white glows moving. Perfectly in line with his speed. He squinted. Maybe it was a reflection. He tapped the brakes lightly. The lights slowed with him. He pressed the pedal a little harder, dropping to 30 miles per hour. The lights matched. "What the hell?" he muttered, then pressed the gas. 50, 60, 70. The lights didn't waver. They stayed the same distance behind him, maybe even a little closer now. A cold sweat prickled the back of his neck. He looked. In the side mirrors, trying to see if there was a vehicle hidden behind the glow, maybe a drone, maybe a car with weird lights, but there was nothing. Just the black top and the white glows floating along like ghosts tied to his bumper. He slammed. The gas .80.80-5.90. The truck groaned and rattled as it picked up speed, the tires humming louder on the road. The lights moved faster too. And then they began to rise. At first, they just lifted a foot or two, but then they were above his cab, gliding in the air. He couldn't see them in the mirror anymore, just white glow pouring in through the back window like he was being followed by a police spotlight, only no shadows formed and no beam touched the road. Just this cold, colorless light that seemed to bleach everything it touched. He thought about pulling over. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe he was seeing things. He checked the dash again. 2:13 a.m. still. He blinked. That wasn't right. The minute hadn't changed. He glanced at his watch. It was dead, not just off-frozen. The second hand was stuck between ticks. He looked at the digital clock again. 2:30. No blinking. No change. The lights behind him pulsed once. Bright. Then again. Brighter. Caleb swore and gripped the wheel. Tighter. The road stretched out endlessly in front of him, but his eyes darted to the tree lines. There had to be a turnoff, a side road, something. Then the radio crackled to life. It had been off for the past 3 hours. Now it hissed with static and a low whisper, no words, just the sound of someone breathing through the speakers. Long, slow breaths, like someone was crouched beside him, whispering through the vents. He twisted the knob, but it wouldn't shut. Off. The breath turned into humming, a slow, old-timey melody. Caleb couldn't place it, but it chilled him. Something about it was familiar, not from memory, but from nightmares. The kind of tune that plays in the background of a dream you can't wake up from. The lights surged forward suddenly, slamming into the bed of the truck, but there was no impact. Just a flash, and then they were gone. He skidded to a stop on the shoulder, tires squealing, heart thudding against his ribs like it wanted out. Silence. No lights. No sound. No breathing. The dashboard clock read 2:13 a.m. He climbed out, legs shaky, boots crunching the gravel on the roadside. He walked to the back of the truck, expecting scorch marks or dents or something, anything. Nothing. He turned back toward the cab. And that's when he saw them. Not behind the truck. Inside. 3 pale lights. Not floating anymore, sitting in the cab. In the passenger seat. In the rear seats. He stepped backward, almost falling into the ditch. The driver's side door creaked open slowly. The dome light flickered, then died. And then the humming started again, but not from the radio. It came from the truck itself, from inside. He turned to run. The lights exploded out of the cab like bullets, flying over him, then stopping, hovering. One blinked out, then the second. The third hovered a moment longer, as if watching him. Then it shot back toward the road and vanished into the sky like a comet. Caleb stood frozen until dawn, unable to move, unable to think. When he finally climbed back into the truck, the battery was dead. His watch was working again. It said 2:14. A dot and dot. He walked the rest of the way into town. When he reached Wichita Falls just after 7, a sheriff's deputy picked him up barefoot and dazed on the side of a country road near Dean. Caleb told him everything. Deputy didn't blink. "You said it happened at 2:30?" he asked. Caleb nodded. The deputy let out a sigh and shook his head. "We've had a few of those stories. Always the same time. Always the lights. Never the same person twice. What are they?" The man didn't answer right away. Just tapped the edge of his notebook and said, "You ever hear about the fire in 64? 3 men, prison escapees, stole a car, took a woman hostage, killed her, ran out of gas just outside Wichita Falls, car caught fire. Whole thing burned on the road at 2:30 a.m. Caleb said nothing. "They say the lights are them, the ones who burned. They chase down anything they think's running same way they ran, but they never catch anyone. Just follow 'em. Until the clock ticks again." Caleb never drove that road again. He never drove at night, and every clock he owns now, he keeps them a minute ahead just in case. The road had started off normal enough, a winding County 2-lane running through the thick pine belt east of Crockett. Hannah had been to this part of Texas once before as a kid, a weekend camping trip she barely remembered except for the smell of pine needles baked by the sun and the constant drone of cicadas. But the place on the map they were heading now didn't ring any bells. She glanced over at Zach behind the wheel, his eyes flicking from the screen of his phone to the road. Every few seconds, their rental, a silver SUV with plates from Oklahoma, hummed over the asphalt. "You sure this is right?" she asked. Zach held the phone up. "Google says we're 25 minutes out. This detour is faster than going through Lufkin." The forest thickened on both sides, tall pines and hickories reaching so high they cast a permanent green gloom over the road. Cell signal had already flickered down to 1 bar, then none. The last gas station they passed was nearly 40 miles back. A boarded-up shell with a broken ice freezer and an old man sitting on a stool, eyes tracking them like he recognized something about their faces. Now, the road ahead looked off. There were no center lines anymore. No signs. Just a narrow path of aging tar patched so many times it looked more like skin than pavement. Eventually, the asphalt gave way to a rough gravel road without any fanfare. The transition was so subtle they barely noticed it. It wasn't until the crunch beneath the tires began echoing through the forest that Hannah leaned forward, her brow furrowing. "Didn't it say this was a service road?" she asked. "Like Forest Service?" Zach nodded. "Yeah, just temporary till we meet up with Farm to Market 1276. It's shortcutting through some old lumber routes or something." Hannah didn't like it. She said nothing for a while, just watched the way the trees grew closer to the road, their limbs beginning to curve downward like they were reaching for the car. The gravel turned finer, more like crushed dirt. Then the gravel disappeared altogether. They didn't notice at first. It had been gradual, like a soft descent into sand. The tires started kicking up dust. The color of the earth changed from tan to a dull gray. When Zach slowed and squinted out the windshield, they realized the road had vanished. "I think it's just part of the trail," Zach mumbled. "Might be old logging territory. Should meet a junction any minute." But there was no junction. Just forest. No birdsong. No wind. Not even insects. The trees towered higher. The branches knitted overhead so tightly it dulled the daylight. The air grew stale, thick with a smell of earth and moss, like they'd driven into a cave disguised as woods. The dust beneath the tires grew darker, and soon the car rumbled as the ground became uneven, roots and buried rocks rising beneath the surface like bones. "Zach, turn around," Hannah said, her voice quiet and flat. Zach put the car into reverse, but the tires didn't move. He shifted into drive. Nothing. A low hum started from beneath the car, subtle at first, like static crackling through a radio, but it grew into something more physical. A vibration that buzzed through the seats, into their spines. The dashboard lights flickered. The air conditioner cut out. The steering wheel locked in place. "I think the car's dead," Zach whispered. "No, you turned it off, right?" "You hit something." "I didn't. Hannah, I didn't touch anything." The windows fogged from the inside, as if a sudden drop in temperature had slammed into them. Hannah wiped her sleeve across the glass, and that's when she saw it. There was no road behind them. Where they'd come from, where the gravel had once been, was just more trees. Solid forest, as if no road had ever existed. She blinked hard, rubbed the glass again. Still trees. Still nothing. She opened the passenger door. "Don't," Zach said, his hand gripping her arm. "I have to. I need to see it for myself." The second her feet touched the dirt, the forest pressed in closer. The air was thicker out here. Not just humid, but full, like there were things in it. Things unseen, brushing against her skin and whispering in a language she couldn't hear, but felt deep inside her skull. She stepped around the car. No road. No tire marks. The dust didn't even bear footprints. Behind her, Zach was calling her name, but it sounded far away, like his voice was bouncing off stone walls a mile away. When she turned around, the SUV was gone. In its place was a cluster of black trees, twisted and unnatural, growing impossibly close together in the exact space where the car had been. "Zach?" she whispered. The trees groaned. Not the creaking of old wood. Not the rustling of wind. It was more like breathing. Labored. Wet. Organic. She ran forward, toward the space where the car had been, toward the impossible trees, and stopped only when something long and gray and covered in hair snaked out from between the trunks and brushed the ground in front of her. A limb. No, not a tree limb. Something else. Something. It moved again, like an arm. Something crawling. Something blind. She turned and ran. But the forest had changed. The trees were no longer pine or oak or anything native to Texas. They were wrong. Black bark that shimmered like oil. Leaves shaped like fingers. Some opened as she passed, revealing slits like mouths lined with teeth that dripped sap the color of blood. She screamed. There was no echo, only the sound of something following. Heavy, dragging. And the humming. Louder now. Louder than her heartbeat. She tripped over a root. A bone, her hand landing in something warm and sticky. She looked down and saw the face of a man half buried in the dirt, his eyes open but glassy. His mouth twitched, then moved. A whisper. "I told it not to take her." She scrambled backward, her palms slick with rot. In the distance, she saw something glowing. A red light, like brake lights. The SUV. It was back. She ran toward it. The forest didn't resist this time. It let her go. For now, she yanked the passenger door open and found Zach sitting perfectly still, hands on the wheel, eyes straight ahead. "Zach, we have to go." "We have to." Then she saw his eyes. They were wrong. Too wide. Too bright. Too still. And there was something moving behind them, like something was wearing his skin. He smiled. "You brought it back with you," he said, voice hollow. The forest behind them swayed as if breathing. The trees leaned in closer, and the road was gone again. The road had been long and mean. 8 hours of westbound traffic from Dallas, thick with brake lights, dust storms near Abilene, and not a goddamn open diner past 10 p.m. Liz's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her eyelids twitching from Red Bulls and highway hypnosis. Travis was in the passenger seat, head bobbing like a puppet's, only half awake, still trying to sync the GPS with some backroad motel he'd vaguely remembered from a camping trip a decade ago. Then came the glow. Red neon sign humming through the pine dark trees. Crooked and low like it had been bent under the weight of time. Vacancy. It flickered twice, then held steady as if it had been waiting for them all night. "Pull over," Travis mumbled, not even lifting his head. "I don't care if it's a crack house. I can't do another hour." Liz didn't argue. Her legs trembled as she pressed the brake, steering the car off the main road and onto a gravel driveway barely visible beneath overgrown weeds. The motel came into full view slowly, an L-shaped row of 10 rooms, all painted a chipped, chalky blue. One security light buzzed near the front office, attracting moths the size of baby birds. The sign above the reception door said Pine Rest Motel. There was no address, no phone number. No Wi-Fi password stuck to the window. The inside of the front office was musty but oddly clean, dustless even. An old man sat behind the desk with a long face and skin like yellowed parchment. His hair was white and thin, combed straight back over a liver-spotted scalp. He didn't smile, but he didn't seem unfriendly either. "Need a room?" he asked. His voice had that sludgy drawl you hear in towns that never grew past the 1960s. "Just one night," Liz said. "King bed if you've got it." He nodded once and slid a key across the counter. An actual metal key on a leather tag embossed with a faded 7. "Room 7, he said. "Checkout's at 10. No smoking, no loud music. And don't open the curtain after midnight, even if you hear something." Liz's mouth parted slightly. "I'm sorry?" The man didn't repeat himself. He just turned to a small black and white TV playing static, like the conversation had ended. They found room 7 easily enough, middle of the row. The door creaked open like a coffin lid. Inside, it was just what they expected. Linoleum floors, itchy bed sheets, a TV too old to have HDMI ports, and an air conditioner that worked like it was coughing dust out of its lungs. But it was warm, quiet. They collapsed onto the mattress like crash test dummies and were asleep in seconds. It was the tapping that woke Liz. 3 sharp raps at the window, then silence, then another 2, softer this time. She blinked, sat up in bed. It was 12:23 a.m. The curtain fluttered slightly, though the AC had gone still. "Travis," she whispered. "Someone's at the window." He didn't move. His body was stiff, mouth slightly open, but his chest didn't rise. She reached over and touched his shoulder. Ice cold. His skin felt dry, like rubber left out in the sun too long. She shook him hard. "Travis?" No response. The tapping came again. And now a voice, soft, childlike. "Let me in. I'm cold. She leapt from the bed, heart racing, skin crawling. She backed into the far corner, staring at the window. The curtain shifted again, just enough for a glimpse. Not a face exactly, but something behind it. Too tall, too still. Liz's instincts screamed to run. But the door, where was the key? It wasn't in her bag. It wasn't on the table. The deadbolt had no twist knob on the inside, just a keyhole. She opened the door anyway. The hallway outside was wrong. It was much longer than it had looked from outside. It stretched on like a tunnel, both ends vanishing into darkness. The other room doors were gone or maybe sealed shut. There were no numbers, no windows. Only that buzzing light. She slammed the door shut, turned to wake Travis again, and screamed. He was sitting upright, eyes open, but they weren't his eyes anymore. They were flat, white like eggshells. His mouth was open but empty, no tongue, just a black pit. She backed away, breath catching in her throat, and then he spoke. But it wasn't Travis's voice. "You were told not to open the curtain." Liz stumbled back to the bathroom and slammed the door, locking it, even though it wouldn't do any good. She leaned against the sink, sobbing, gasping. The mirror was fogged over. She wiped it with her palm and saw herself, except not her. Reflection didn't match her breathing. It was slower, more deliberate. And it was smiling. That's when the walls began to bleed. Not red blood, black. Like ink pouring from the ceiling corners, sliding down the mirror, dripping into the sink. She screamed and ran. She didn't stop to check Travis again. She yanked the door open, and this time the hallway was different. Worse. Every door was wide open now. Inside each was a figure, some lying in bed, some sitting at dusty tables, all still, all silent. Their faces twisted or absent. Their skin the same waxy texture as Travis's. Liz ran. She didn't look back. She found the front door, pushed it open, and the office was gone. She was standing in the middle of the highway, the same one they'd driven earlier, but there were no cars. No neon, just woods. Thick, black trees crowding the shoulder, leaning inward as if listening. She turned to look behind her. The motel was still there, right behind her. Quiet, buzzing, door slightly ajar. Room 7. She tried walking forward. Her feet felt heavy. The road in front of her was clear, but something pulled at her back, a pressure in her chest, like strings pulling her ribs inward. She ran. 10 feet, 20, 40. Then a scream from behind her. Travis's voice. "Liz, help me." She froze, swallowed. "Liz, please." "I didn't open the curtain." She turned, and the motel was gone again. Just trees, highway, darkness. She ran until the sun came up. When a gas station finally appeared, she collapsed at the counter, breathless and shaking. A young clerk gave her water and called an ambulance. She asked him if he knew about the Pine Rest Motel off the 84. Said it was just a couple miles back. The clerk frowned. "There's no motel back there, ma'am. Hasn't been one in years." She insisted. Gave him the name, the room number. The old man's face. The clerk nodded slowly, jaw tight. "My uncle used to tell stories about that place. Burned down in 78. Electrical fire, they say everyone inside died. They never rebuilt, just left it to rot." She shook her head. "No, we stayed there. Room 7. It was clean." It was he. Cut her off. Room 7 was the one where it started. Man opened his curtain. Let something in. They say it took his voice. Then his eyes. Then his soul. She didn't say anything after that. And when the police drove out to the spot she described, they found nothing but trees and dirt. No motel. No gravel path, but they did find a key, metal, slightly rusted. Leather tag still attached. The number 7. The woman at the gas station was wiping down a stack of lottery tickets with a damp cloth when she looked up and saw them. Tourists, or maybe just city folks too curious for their own good. She narrowed her eyes at the couple white SUV, fresh. Austin plates, windows half down like they trusted the wind wouldn't lie to them. She didn't say a word until they asked for directions. "We're headed east. Google says this dirt road will cut through faster than the highway. Save us 30 minutes." Kevin grinned, tapping his phone screen. The GPS voice echoed faintly. "Turn right in 500 feet. The woman looked at the phone like it was a joke told too many times. "Google don't know these parts," she said flatly. "Not past the old Garrison turn." That road you're looking at ... it don't end. Mira, standing behind Kevin, frowned. What do you mean? The woman didn't blink. I mean it don't end. You go down that way, you keep going, and going. Till it ain't you driven no more. Kevin laughed. Come on. It's just a shortcut. Worst case, we turn around. The woman didn't respond. Just went back to wiping down the tickets. Slower this time, her eyes still on them even as they turned and walked out the door. The road started normal enough. Dusty, cracked gravel packed down over decades, weaving past barbed wire fences and cow pastures spotted with rusted water troughs. Oak trees hunched over the path like old men at a poker game, their limbs low and twitching in the wind. They drove on, music playing low-some Tom Petty song neither of them knew the words to. Kevin kept checking the phone. Still says we're on track, he said. Mira stared out the window. The fields were gone now, replaced by woods. Thick woods. The kind you didn't see out this way anymore. No clearings, no deer, not even birdsong. Just trees packed shoulder to shoulder, their bark dark like soot and twisted like rope. You sure this is right? She asked. Kevin didn't answer. He was watching the screen. The blue dot had started to jump. The road narrowed. Then it curved. Then it split, but the GPS didn't show the split. The voice just repeated, "Continue straight." What does straight even mean here? Kevin muttered. They took the left fork. The gravel thinned to hard dirt. The trees leaned in closer, blocking out more light. The sun, which should have still been high, felt dimmer, cooler, like dusk had crept in early. Mira glanced back. There's no one behind us. No one's been behind us for 20 minutes, Kevin replied. They drove in silence. The Tom Petty song had ended long ago, and now only the low hum of the engine remained. That and the occasional thump from underneath, like the car was rolling over roots that weren't there before. The trees turned black. Not just in shadow but black, like they were burned without smoke. And the road. It twisted in on itself, looping in wide, lazy turns that somehow kept pulling them forward. There was no way they should still be in these woods. They should have reached the highway by now, or a dead end, or something. But the road kept going. Eventually, they stopped. Kevin turned off the engine. Total silence. Not even wind. They stepped out of the SUV and were met with the smell of copper. Not blood, not exactly, but close. The kind of smell you remember from scraped knees and rusted pipe water. Mira turned in place slowly. No birds, she whispered. No bugs, Kevin said. They walked a few feet ahead, boots crunching on gravel. That was no longer gravel. It was powder. Dust fine as ash. Behind them, the car looked farther away than it should have. Mira took a step back toward it and felt something shift. Not in the ground, in the space. The air. Like walking through a curtain of static. The moment she passed through it, she heard it. Whispers, not words. Just shapes of them, like someone trying to talk through water. She spun. Kevin was gone. She screamed his name, ran back toward where he had been standing, but it wasn't the same. The trees had moved, grown closer, their trunks now too close together for any path to exist. She turned back to the SUV. Gone. In its place was a fence, rotting wood, a gate made of chicken wire and bones, small ones, ribs and femurs tied with twine. Mira fell to her knees, gagging. The whispering got louder. Then she heard Kevin. He wasn't calling her name, he was laughing. That's what broke her. Kevin didn't remember when they turned off the road. He didn't even remember stopping the car. 1 second they were driving. The next he was walking through woods that shouldn't exist. But he didn't feel scared. Not anymore. He felt numb. The trees whispered to him now. Told him things. Showed him shapes in the branches. Faces. Some smiling. Some just watching. one with eyes that bled moths. Another with a mouth full of keys. He saw Mira once, or something. Wearing her face. It was crouched behind a fallen tree, grinning wide, its head tilted like a curious dog. The skin on its neck bubbled like it had been boiled. Kevin smiled back. The road went on. He didn't remember how long he'd been walking. Time was syrup here. Slow, sticky, unreal. He found old things sometimes. A boot with a foot still inside. A rusted can of motor oil with blood on the cap. A jawbone. Human, probably. A phone his? He picked it up. The screen flickered. It tried to load a map, but only one word showed, home. And under it, smaller, recalculating. In town, people don't talk much about that road anymore. The Garrison turn? That's what they used to call it. Back when people still tried. Now it's just part of the woods. Doesn't show up on maps. Doesn't even have a signpost. Locals. No better. They teach their kids young. If you see a road past Palestine that looks too quiet, don't take it. Some say you drive long enough and you forget your name. Some say you start seeing people in the trees who look just like you, only older, twisted. Some say the road doesn't end because it isn't a road. It's a hunger. It remembers every car. That rolls its tires across that first patch of gravel, and it waits, patiently, for the next turn. One day, someone will drive out there again. They always do. The first time Lucas saw her, he thought she was a deer. Just past midnight, driving down the long black stretch of FM 1168 outside of Seymour, Texas, his headlights caught a pale flash on the shoulder. The road was dead silent, hemmed in by barbed wire fences and shadowy wheat fields waving under the moonlight. The kind of stretch that looked like it hadn't seen traffic since the war. Lucas had been driving for hours, trying to outrun the weight of what had happened in Dallas. The argument, the broken bottle, the mess in his kitchen. He hadn't wanted to hurt her, he just hadn't wanted to lose. The way she looked at him after it all was worse than the cops. So he packed up, threw everything he needed into a duffel bag, and hit the road without a real destination. The woman, if it was a woman, was crawling. Not stumbling, not limping. Crawling, elbows grinding against the asphalt, arms dragging her body like something ancient and broken. Lucas squinted, slowed down. She was wearing white. Or what used to be white. The fabric was tattered, filthy. Trailing behind her like a shredded wedding dress. He stopped. Rolled down the window. "Hey, you all right?" Her head didn't turn. Her hands clawed forward with unnatural rhythm, dragging her legs which hung limp behind her like dead meat. Lucas opened the door. The air was cold, unusually so for Texas in late September. He stepped out, boots crunching gravel. "You need help?" he asked again. The woman paused. Lucas stopped moving. Her arms stopped, and then her head jerked toward him. Her face wasn't a face. Not anymore. Just a pale smear of skin and blood, the mouth gaping open wider than it should. Teeth glinting like cracked porcelain. No nose, no eyes. Just torn flesh hanging like ribbons down her cheeks. Lucas stumbled back into the truck, slamming the door and locking it without thinking. He fumbled for the ignition, cranked the key. The engine stalled. Come on. The second crank took. Headlights flared. He slammed the gas pedal, tires screeching against gravel. Heart thudding in his throat. As he looked into the rearview mirror, she was still crawling faster now. Somehow gaining on him, her arms pumping with horrifying strength. That gaping. Maw never closing, never blinking. He didn't stop again that night. He drove until the sun started rising over the Texas plains, stopping at a beat-up diner in Archer City. The waitress poured him coffee and asked if he was all right. Lucas didn't say anything, just stared out the window, half expecting to see her face pressed against the glass dot by the third refill. He was convinced it had been exhaustion. Maybe a deer. Maybe a sick woman who'd been in an accident. But then she wouldn't have been moving like that. And that face, he decided not to tell anyone. But the road didn't forget. Days later, he was gassing up in Vernon when an old man at the pump looked over his shoulder and said, "You seen her?" Lucas froze. Who? The woman on the highway, on her elbows. Lucas didn't answer. Just stared. "She's been out there since '94, the old man said. "Some say she was hitching, got hit, dragged half a mile. Cops never found the car. Only thing left was one high heel and a cracked tooth buried in the tar." Lucas said nothing. "She's still looking for someone to finish the drag." That night, Lucas stayed off the highways, took the back roads instead. Dirt paths and winding gravel lanes that led through towns barely hanging on to existence. Still, every now and then, in the corner of his headlight beam, he thought he saw a figure slumped in the distance. Sometimes it was nothing, sometimes it was a deer. But once, just past Lake Kemp, it was her again, dragging faster this time. Smiling. He didn't sleep that night. The dreams came anyway. He was behind the wheel, just like always. The road was endless, black ribbon with no horizon. In the distance, a figure began to crawl toward him, not away toward. Against traffic. Her elbows scraped asphalt, knuckles cracked and bleeding, white dress shredded like it had been through a blender. As she got closer, the lights failed. The engine died. Everything went black except her. Glowing in the dark dot, she reached the front of the truck, pulled herself up the hood. Her face was closer now, her mouth opening wider than it should. Something spilled out of it. Teeth? Nails? Screams? Lucas woke up screaming in the bed of his truck, sweating through his clothes. When he finally told someone, an old bartender in Monday, the man just shook his head. "She don't go after everyone," he said. "Only the ones trying to run." Run? From what? The bartender smiled without warmth. "You know?" Lucas didn't ask more. He didn't need to. He'd been running for days. From Dallas. From blood on the tiles. From the look in her eyes, she knew. The next night, it rained hard Texas thunder. Lightning arcing across the plains. Lucas drove faster than he should have. The radio refused to tune in. Every station was static or soft moaning. Once, he swore. He heard her voice gargled, wet, saying, "Stop." He did in single quotes "T-dot" until the truck hit something. The jolt slammed him forward. He braked hard, got out. The rain washed over everything. The road was slick and black and glistening like a snake's. Back, and there she was 20 feet behind the truck. Head down, crawling. Even in the rain she moved. Her elbows grinding down. Her fingers leaving smears of blood and water. Lucas backed away. "No," he whispered. "No, no." But he tripped. Hit the pavement. The rain slapped his face. When? He looked up. She was only 10 feet away. Then 5. Then she stopped, looked up at him. For the first time, he heard her voice clearly. "Your turn." He screamed. He ran. But something held his legs. Wouldn't move. Something. Heavy. Dragging. Lucas looked down. His knees were shredded. Broken. Blood poured down his thighs. His arms were the only things that moved. No. He tried to get up. But his legs, he screamed again and began to crawl. He felt the gravel grinding into his skin. Elbows crunching under the weight. Hands trembling. In the distance, headlights came. A car. He turned to wave them down. To scream for help. But all that came out was a gargled croak. The car didn't stop. Didn't even slow. Lucas kept crawling. One elbow at a time. He was still there at dawn. Or what was left of him. But now, on that stretch of highway past Seymour, they say 2 figures crawled the road. A man with torn jeans, dragging himself with ruined elbows, and just ahead of him, a woman. In white, smiling, waiting for someone else to join the crawl. The rain had just started up again, a slow hiss against the windshield like the whisper of something waiting in the trees. Jason flipped his wipers on and squinted through the murk, the wet East Texas highway stretching in front of him like a fat, black ribbon laid over swamp. It was past midnight, and his rental car's dashboard clock read 12:47 a.m. He'd been driving for hours, headed toward Jasper, trying to make it to his cousin's place before dawn. He hadn't seen another set of headlights in what felt like forever. Just trees, shadows, and the humming quiet of a land forgotten by time. The GPS voice chirped out, bright and oblivious. "Continue straight for 6 miles." Jason nodded to himself, gripping the wheel tighter. No turns, no problem. The only thing ahead was the straight shot through the dense pine woods. Miles of nothing. He figured he'd make it before 2, maybe sooner if he pushed it a bit. Then he saw it. A red stop sign. Just up ahead. He frowned and tapped the brakes. "What the hell?" the GPS insisted. "Continue straight." But there it was. A bright red octagon standing on the right side of the road, planted firm into the gravel shoulder, glowing with beads of rain. Jason slowed to a crawl. The road didn't intersect with another. There was no crossing traffic, no driveway, no reason for a stop sign in the middle of nowhere. It just stood there, commanding. Not faded, not vandalized. No bullet holes like the usual ones he'd seen out in the boonies. This sign was new. He pulled to a full stop and stared. His phone buzzed in the console. Another message from Carrie. He ignored it. They'd fought earlier. She didn't understand why he had to take this trip alone. Something about Jasper and his uncle's land called to him in a way he couldn't explain. Jason had inherited the cabin after Uncle Roy's death, and he hadn't even been back to the area in 20 years, not since the summer he'd stopped coming after his father. Disappeared. The pine trees around the stop sign pressed in close. Too close. Like the forest had grown right up to the edge of the road. The shoulders were overgrown, the ditch swallowed in kudzu and brambles, and yet the sign looked like it had been planted yesterday. He leaned forward, peering past the sign. Beyond it, the road continued, but something about it was wrong. The asphalt looked older, cracked. The center line was faded. The trees seemed to arch more tightly overhead, swallowing the moonlight, creating a shadowed tunnel of black-green. Jason's GPS didn't skip a beat. Continue straight for 5.8 miles. He let the car idle, fingers drumming the wheel. Then he spotted the small white sticker at the base of the sign. It was a dot inspection tag. Dated 4 days ago. Bullshit, he muttered. Who was inspecting? Traffic signs out here in the middle of nowhere, and why? There was no crossroad, no intersection, no logical reason for a stop sign. His GPS app, updated last week, clearly showed no change to the highway. Jason rolled down his window and stuck his head out. The woods smelled heavy with rain and pine resin, and something else, something sharp and earthy, like turned soil or rot. He pulled his head back in, uneasy. He reached over and silenced the GPS. He could navigate the rest by feel. After all, it was just 6 miles. A straight shot into Jasper. He rolled past the stop sign. For the first 2 miles, everything looked the same. The pine trees, the wet asphalt, the sigh of wind through the needles. But then the radio turned on by itself. At first, just static. Then a voice cut in, low and crackling. "You should have stopped." Jason's blood turned cold. He hit the power button. Nothing. The screen stayed on, flickering. The static came back louder, like something grinding its teeth in the speakers. Then the car lurched, as if the wheels dipped into a pothole that wasn't there. The headlights flickered. The forest around him seemed to press closer, the trees, now gnarled and ancient, moss-covered, the pine scent overtaken by the reek of swamp and mold. His hands trembled on the wheel. He looked in the rearview mirror. The stop sign was gone. The road behind him had changed. No longer smooth blacktop, it was rough gravel now, edged by ditchwater and reeds like a service road to nowhere. His headlights couldn't penetrate the darkness behind him more than 20 feet. No shoulder. No way to turn around. His phone buzzed again. He checked the screen. No signal. Then it went black. Jason slowed the car. The air had turned thick, like driving through soup. His headlights barely illuminated 10 feet in front of him now. The trees had changed again, no longer the tall pines of East Texas, but older, twisted oaks with bark like torn flesh. Spanish. Moss hung like nooses from their branches. He stopped the car, and the engine died. Everything went silent. He tried the ignition again. Nothing. The dashboard was dead. No clicks. No whirring. He sat there in the dark, breath catching in his throat, every instinct screaming. The woods outside were wrong. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was waiting, watching. A soft tapping came from the back window. He spun. Around. Nothing. Then he heard it again, closer, this time, from the driver's side window. Tap. Jason reached slowly to his right and flicked on the flashlight app on his phone. It came on, just barely. The light was weak, sputtering. He aimed it toward the window and saw her, a woman, soaked, with stringy black hair plastered to her face. Her eyes were gone, just black sockets. Her mouth hung open, jaw unhinged and slack, as if broken. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She just stood inches from the glass, mouth twitching. Jason screamed and hit the lock button. The doors were already locked, but the tapping didn't stop. It grew faster, urgent. Then it was on all sides of the car. Dozens of hands, small, pale. Some missing fingers. Some pressing smears of blood onto the windows. Shadows flickered across the hood. Shapes moved just beyond the light. Faces half seen, mouths open in silent screams. Jason closed his eyes. He whispered, "Please, let me wake up." When he opened them, the figures were gone. The woods were empty again. Silent. The car started. The dash flickered back to life. The GPS turned itself back on. In 2 miles, it said, as if nothing had happened. Turn right. Jason drove. Hands clenched, heart hammering. The road slowly turned back to blacktop. The trees thinned. The normal pine woods returned. Street signs reappeared. The lights of Jasper began to show through the gaps in the trees. He didn't speak a word when he arrived at his cousin's place. Didn't mention the stop sign, or the dead-eyed woman, or the tapping. But that night, while lying in bed, he searched online for anything he could find. And that's when he saw it, a Reddit thread. Buried deep. Anyone seen the phantom stop sign outside Jasper? Replies filled the comments. Yeah, I drove past it once. Wrecked my car a mile later. No road there at all. My uncle disappeared. After ignoring it, state police couldn't explain it. It only shows up for some people. Don't know why. Maybe it's a test. It's not just a sign. It's a choice. Jason closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The next morning, he went outside. There, just across the road, planted in the gravel at the edge of the woods, was a brand new stop sign, but this time the backside was smeared in fresh handprints. You wouldn't notice anything wrong with Eastland if you were just passing through. The streets are clean, the grass always clipped short along the curbs, the lampposts painted a fresh coat of white every season. The people wave at you, genuinely wave, like they're welcoming you home. Not the lazy kind of half-lifted hand you get in most towns, but a full sweep of the arm, followed by a smile so wide it makes you slow down a little, just to be polite. That's what Drew thought when he drove in at sunset, windshield bug splattered, and his back aching from 6 hours behind the wheel. The sign had said, Eastland, smiling since 1891, and underneath it, in hand-painted red letters, We love visitors. His GPS rerouted him through Eastland because of a wreck on I-20. He hadn't meant to stop, but the glowing orange sun, dipped halfway beneath the tree line, had lit up the old town strip like something out of a postcard. There was a gas station with working pumps, a diner with a blinking neon open sign, and a tiny white hotel that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1960s. Drew figured it wouldn't hurt to rest a few hours. Maybe get some eggs and coffee in the morning, fill up the tank, and be back on the road before 9. Just a few hours. That's all he ever planned. The first thing he noticed was how quiet it was. Not dead quiet. There were crickets and the occasional distant bark, but there wasn't any traffic noise. No teenagers loitering around the gas station, no late-night music. Just peace and people watching. He saw them out on porches. An old man in denim overalls stood perfectly still with a hand raised high as Drew drove by. His mouth spread into an unnatural grin that revealed teeth like white ceramic tiles. On the next block, 2 kids sat on the curb, their heads turning slowly as his car passed, smiling like they were in on a joke he hadn't heard yet. When he pulled into the hotel, Eastland Inn, the sign said, a bell above the lobby door jingled, loud in the stillness. The front desk was manned by a woman in a pale blue sweater. She smiled the way the rest of them did. Too wide, too long. Room 6, she said, handing him an old-fashioned metal key. Checkouts whenever you like. We're just glad you're here. Her eyes were gray, too gray and dry. Like dull eyes. Drew nodded, took the key, and muttered thanks. As he turned to go, she said, You're gonna sleep real well tonight. Folks always do. The room was clean. Not just clean, sterile. There was no dust, no smell, not even that musty motel odor most small-town rooms have. The bed was stiff and perfectly made. The walls were bare. The lampshades were all turned at the same angle. It felt like someone had scrubbed it of any personality. But he didn't think much of it. He was tired. He didn't bother to shower, just dropped onto the mattress, shoes off, phone on the nightstand. He woke sometime around 2 a.m. with a pain in his jaw. At first, he thought he'd been grinding his teeth in his sleep. But the ache wasn't in the joint, it was in the skin. Like something had stretched it. He got up, shuffled to the bathroom, flipped on the light. What stared back from the mirror wasn't immediately him. His mouth looked wrong, wider. Not just swollen, but tugged. His cheeks were tight, like someone had hooked wires into the corners of his mouth and pulled them toward his ears. He touched his face. His fingers trembled. The skin along the corners of his lips was red, raw, stretched to a degree that made him queasy. Like his smile had been forcibly widened. He laughed nervously, tried to close his mouth. It closed, mostly, but the corners resisted. He looked again. No bruises, no blood. But the flesh didn't move right. He figured maybe he'd slept wrong. Maybe it was a weird muscle spasm. Maybe he'd hit his face and forgotten. He took a deep breath, drank some water, and went back to bed. But he couldn't sleep. Not after that, because when he shut his eyes, he saw people. Rows of them, standing in silence, all smiling, all looking at him. He turned on the TV. Just static. His phone had no signal. No Wi-Fi either. The desk clerk hadn't mentioned a check-in. System, no cameras. No one asked for ID. Just room 6. Just we're glad you're here. Drew went outside. The night air was heavy warm. The moon hung overhead like a pale blister, and on every porch someone stood, watching. They didn't speak, just smiled. One by one, heads tilted, mouths stretched. Some smiled so wide he could see their gums, the darkness behind their teeth. He backed away slowly, hand in his pocket gripping his car keys. He didn't care if he was being rude now, he was leaving. Gas tank be damned. But when he reached the parking lot, his car was gone. Not broken into. Not vandalized. Gone. He walked in circles for a minute, then rushed back into the hotel lobby. The woman at the desk was gone. In her place was a man, tall, thin, suit buttoned too tight. His smile didn't even blink as Drew stumbled in, rambling. "Where's my car? It was here, right here. Room 6. A man held out a mirror, small, oval, like a shaving mirror. He didn't speak, just gestured. Drew looked and screamed. His mouth was no longer human. The skin had split. The corners of his lips were jagged, peeled outward like torn paper. His gums were blackened, the teeth too perfect, like someone had replaced his real ones. With porcelain veneers. And worse, there was something underneath, a shimmer, a movement, like another face trying to press through his skin, grinning wider, wider still. He dropped the mirror, staggered backward. The man behind the desk tilted his head. "You look like one of us now," he said. Drew ran out the door, into the road, through the still streets of Eastland. Every house he passed had figures in the windows, smiling, watching. He didn't stop until he reached the edge of town. The welcome sign faced the other direction now, but he saw something scratched into the back of it, barely visible under the moonlight. No exit. He turned and ran the other way. No GPS, no compass. Just his legs. The last thing he remembers is collapsing near a water tower. The sky was gray by then, morning. He thinks when he woke up he was in a hospital. Abilene, they told him. A trucker had found him by the side of the road, shoeless, shirtless, his mouth torn at the sides like he'd tried to carve it open. The doctor said it looked self-inflicted, that maybe he'd had some kind of breakdown. There were no drugs in his system, no alcohol, just blood under his fingernails and muscle tearing around his mouth. They gave him medication, therapy. He never went back to Eastland, but he checked. Once, months later, while sitting at a diner in Dallas. There was no Eastland Inn listed online. No diner, no smiling woman. The town was real, but it wasn't on any maps the way he remembered. And when he sees someone wave at him now, when a stranger smiles a little too wide, he turns the other way, because sometimes he swears. They don't blink, and his mouth, even now, doesn't close all the way.